were there. He was captured, and then he was like burned alive on HD video, so a similar production to what we have here now.
Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone. It's episode number 90 with my friend and epic human, Matt Bruce. He is an author and a meditation teacher. My man, thank you for taking time to do this.
Hey bro, thanks
Good.
for having me.
Okay, first question straight off the bat. You already know it, but could you please describe the way that you view yourself as a man and or human?
Definitely human, and just changing in every moment, and I guess and growing in every moment, and then kind of surrendering to my life and surrendering to change, and just trying to be the best version of myself every day.
That's concise. Do you think about that much?
Yeah, I think over the last year or two on this kind of growth period, definitely in a growth spurt, and that's kind of not growing upwards, that's kind of growing more inward, and I definitely think about who I want to be and how I want to show up, for my relationship and my friendship, and how I want to show up for myself, etc. So I have given it a fair bit of thought.
That's awesome. And especially sort of knowing you right now, the person that you are right now, the human that you are right now, it's hard for me to picture you being anything different. So I think this is going to be good for me as well as the audience to hear what you've been through, what you've used to help you transform, and where you're at now. So could you please, seeing as your first story that you're going to share is at about 21 years old, could you please give us a breakdown of your childhood up until that point when you're 21 and going away for service?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of this growth spurt that I've been going through is going through and unpacking that. So a lot of meditation, a lot of breath work, and for me to kind of really witness some of the stories that I had from my childhood, and a lot of them relating to my mum and dad. So I guess I grew up in country Victoria. My father was kind of heavy-handed, pretty angry, and he had a lot of caring qualities. But I guess as a child we kind of tend to remember the worst qualities, and that's kind of ultimately some of the behaviours that we take on as young adults as well too. And then my mum probably wasn't the most affectionate person as well, and I think that growing up not having that level of kind of intimacy and affection from my mum definitely shaped the adult I was as a male. And that kind of showed up in other relationships and other aspects of my life. So it's been really cool in this last few years to really go back and unpack all of that and forgive myself and forgive my parents, and a lot of tears and a lot of crying, a lot of thoughts of like me feeling like I wasn't listened to or wasn't loved as a young boy, and ultimately me growing up as a man and feeling that I wasn't loved as well too. So I know I was loved, and I guess it's those perceptions, and I think there's a lot of pain in that too, like a lot of pain that I'd suppressed as a male in not feeling kind of loved and accepted from my mum as a young kid, and then it's really allowed me to flourish and be a better person myself, to really understand that I was loved on so many layers and so many deeper layers. So I guess it was a good childhood, but still there was still some deep stuff that I took on within my kind of psyche that basically shaped who I was, and probably even led to me joining the army.
That's a powerful insight, profound insight. Knowing how the way you were raised, the way that you were treated, or the way that you perceived all of that as a child, especially in relation to your parents, who are your role models, your nurturers, and then understanding that may have played some role or influenced you to join the army. That's powerful, man. When you talk about your dad being heavy-handed and then not having affection, how do you understand how that manifested in terms of like the behaviour that you exhibited throughout your childhood? I think that ultimately I've had a very addictive personality. So whether it be when I was in the army for 10 years, exercise, like 2 workouts a day for nearly 10 years, just massively. And I guess I've always had like a sense of lack, because I guess I wasn't feeling deeply loved within myself from my parents, that therefore I kind of have always looked to external validation to kind of supplement that.
and that could be through multiple inputs. And I think a lot of my personality about having kind of validation around ideas and who I was as a person, I'd seek that out in interpersonal relationships in different ways, and then through exercise and substances and food. A massive one for me was probably food.
Well,
I think as a young kid I was pretty overweight, and I think that was probably my first form of validation, that, you know, if I wasn't feeling that love or comfort from my parents, or perceiving that love or comfort wasn't there, that I'd eat excess food. And I was really kind of getting those highs from sugar and whatnot. And I guess that's a bit of self-fulfilling prophecy when you're eating so much food that you're overweight, and then you really am starting to feel those places of lack and unlove for yourself, which is what you were feeling earlier as well too. So yeah,
just unconsciously affirming what you already believed anyway.
100%. Yeah.
And so let's move on to 21 years old, joining the army. Walk me through, I guess, the thought process behind that happening, what happened, and then walk us through that story.
Yeah, I think being at 21 in a small country town, and I was always an intelligent kid, but I don't think I paid enough attention at school. So then career opportunities and like the mates I was hanging around with at the time, and basically, I was on a path to nowhere. So partying way too much, and obviously I had no direction, no purpose within my life. And I guess being in that small country town, I wanted to kind of escape. And without kind of knowing it, I just saw the ad for the army one day. Saw that I could go get a job in telecommunications, so I signed up and kind of made some changes in my lifestyle there. I guess I went through a little bit of a growth spurt for me to be able to go join the army in the first place. So I cut away some of my friendship circles, some of the partying and stuff that I was doing, even started to train and got into like a healthier lifestyle. And then I think a year later, after me kind of going and sitting all the testing, etc., I was off to Kapooka to join the army. Yeah.
Well, so what are some of the things that you learnt throughout that part of the journey?
That I could
either about yourself or about, I guess, what sort of behaviour you were exhibiting.
That was very unhealthy masculine behaviour, and I guess that learnt from a lot of my peers, and I guess I learnt how impressionable we can be as young people.
Yeah.
I had a really best mate growing up, and his older brother was basically like somebody that I looked up to, and the behaviours that he went in and was basically the behaviours that he was showing and what he was doing was what I would follow. Subconsciously, I was just kind of like looking up to him and basically walking down the same path as my peers. So I guess, one of the main things to learn there is like, as an older person, we have to be aware of subconsciously what we're passing on to the younger generations. And even if he's not telling me to go do something, we're watching and we're learning. That was probably one of the most profound things that I learned around that period.
That's awesome. Having spoken to a few guys that have been in the army, one of the, I guess, lacks for a lot of those guys that I've spoken to is a lack of the sense of self. Like they didn't really know who they were, and so enlisting in the army was for them becoming a part of something. I guess, to build some sort of identity. Did you know who you were at that point?
Yeah, I think I did. I think it was more of an escapism for me, ultimately. And, who knows, I might have been trying to escape the pain of not feeling love from my mum and kind of some of these subconscious pain patterns that I wasn't aware of at the time. And maybe I was just trying to check out of those. But I definitely kind of had a sense of identity in who I was back then. And I wasn't looking to the army as like something that I really wanted to go do. It was more of something I had to go do, and something that I knew that it was going to put me on a better path and set me up for the future, which I'm really glad that I went and joined. What the army gave me over the 10 years that I was in it was huge. Like the lessons that I learned, the stability, the opportunities, it's quite massive. Yeah.
Awesome, brother. Walk us through the story from where you left off. Hey guys, just want to take a quick second to give you a word from our sponsors. Hopefully I'm wearing the same clothes I was back in that interview, but don't worry about it. We've got 3 amazing sponsors. We've got Made It Nutrition, that is plant-based supplements. They're all about the holistic lifestyle. They're all about the mind, body, and spirit, and they're doing that through their high-intensity bodyweight workouts as well as those plant-based supplements. Number 2 is CrossFit Long Haul, the Good Times Gym out in Maddington. Now what they do is they offer personal training. They obviously offer CrossFit group training, and they will tailor your nutrition plan to help you achieve your goals. And the reason that I've partnered with CrossFit Long Haul out there in Maddington is because I'm a friend of the owner. I know her, and she's all about that holistic approach as well, combining and intertwining the physical and the mental. So you'll be in good hands there. CrossFit Long Haul out of Maddington. Number 3 is Toby Prunty. He is Perth's first home buyer expert. Now, the reason that I've partnered with him doesn't sound like it's a good mix with a mental health podcast, but the reason that we have partnered is because he has been through his own mental health journey. He has played the support role to someone suffering with mental health for the last 7 years. And what he's doing and the direction that he's taking with his business is not only is he helping people buy their first home, but he's helping people get the best deals possible. And we know that's super important because through the statistics that have come out, we know that financial stress is one of the main contributors to male suicide. So he's very much on that bandwagon. He's very much about mental health and incorporating mental health into that first home buying process. Ciao.
21 years of age when I joined the army. I was in telecommunications, so like a signals corps. Off to Kapuka, 3 years in Melbourne. Got a little bit unlucky there, I broke my foot. So I had basically a year in limbo with a broken foot. And that wasn't the greatest. I guess there's a bit of a pattern of like maybe bastardization or kind of bullying within the military when you're kind of like injured for that long. So I guess I kind of received a little bit of that, maybe reinforcing some of that conditioning I already had. But that kind of just made me more resilient, made me a little bit stronger, and made me really connect with exercise probably on a deeper level, to just have to not be able to exercise for a year and to be broken and be off my foot for a year just made me want to hit it really hard when I got back. So then off to Brisbane, and the tempo is quite busy. So when I got to that unit, really busy tempo. And I think that, one of the thing that, like, it's really similar to FIFO. I guess a lot of the guys in the army can be struggling with mental health issues is because of the tempo. And ultimately, the tempo of FIFO and the army is kind of out of alignment as how we could naturally be living our life, how we have been for the last few thousand years versus what modern society's kind of created. So in that tempo, that was a change. And I was off to Afghanistan, so deployed to Afghanistan.
Well, so when you initially get told you're going to be deployed, what's the initial response or reaction to that? Because for me, thinking about that, I'd be shitting myself. Yeah,
I think ultimately you start to become conditioned when you're in the military. I guess it's that fight or flight reactive training.
Yeah.
And even that fight or flight reactive training is kind of an emotional response, that we're learning to kind of push those down and not really buy into them as much. And I guess that happens all the way through training. So by the time you're ready to actually get deployed, your mind and your body has been so conditioned from the in-barracks training to actually kind of really accept that as part of the culture. It's definitely something that you train for. So by the time you're actually ready to go to Afghanistan, you are pretty ready. But in being ready, you're basically disconnecting from your emotions and disconnecting from the fear that is natural to have behind it. So as you said, natural response would be to have fear, but a soldier's kind of trained to not have fear. And I think ultimately that's where a lot of trouble can come in when people are getting deployed overseas, that if they're not healthily relating to their emotions, how can we actually kind of really move through something that we might see over there, or the stress that we might take on from being a soldier? How we actually, you know, we're not consciously having a conversation at the end of the day with your workmate about how stressed you are, or what you've seen that day. Those things are kind of getting pushed kind of further down.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of living in this like cycle of stimulation, I guess. So yeah.
That's cool. One thing I want to touch on before we carry on with the story is the bullying. In that environment, I'm assuming it's sort of like FIFO, where it's tight-knit, where it's like this unspoken rule of being a brotherhood of some type.
Yeah.
With the bullying, and then pretty much affirming that right now, as this guy with a broken foot who is broken, you don't fit in. How did you manage to work through that or process that?
To be honest, I think I was so young and had such a lack of emotional intelligence that I didn't even unpack that.
Wow.
I was just taking that on and just moving through life. And I guess that it's probably part of, as soon as you get off the bus within the army, or you start your army career, you're just so stimulated and so reactive that there is a real lack of self-awareness, and emotional intelligence is kind of like severely lacking within soldiers. Yeah.
Did you have any relationships throughout that period where you enlisted and then you're finally deployed to Afghanistan, knowing that you've been training in this fight or flight environment, learning to, I guess, disassociate from the normal reactions and emotions?
Yeah, so I had a partner for like 8 years.
Wow.
And that was from when I was in Melbourne, and then when I deployed in Afghanistan, yeah, she stayed home. And even when I posted over here to Perth and was supporting like the SAS, she was still my partner at the time as well too. So yeah, definitely a lot of respect for her. She really stood by my side a lot. And yeah, I guess that's part of the extra stresses that are added onto a soldier as well too. There's the deployment in itself, but then there's the fact that your partner is at home, and the emotional stress that kind of carries between you within a relationship. So not only do we have the stresses of war, we have the stress of our partner being at home as well too, and they're kind of adding to that stuff that we're kind of suppressing or pushing down or not communicating about.
Yeah. Just that lack of deep emotional connection.
Yeah.
Like you've already disassociated from it, but now you've actually like physically disassociated by leaving to another country, and then leaving them in this sort of limbo where they're every day also in this fight or flight, worrying, stressed, anxious about the fact that you might actually be killed, and they might get that phone call like we see on all the war movies.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's a horrible position to be in as a partner.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, I guess a lot of the growth that I've had in the last few years is kind of really forgiving myself for some of the places that I put my ex-partner through, and some of the stuff that I've kind of come back, and as my emotions closed off further and further within the military, my coping mechanisms, when I didn't have exercise, my coping mechanisms become pretty dark. And I guess in those darker coping mechanisms and in those more closed off emotional times there was a lot of challenges with my ex. And after my most recent deployment to Jordan, come back, I think I was that emotionally closed off that she wanted to end the relationship. And I'm like, why do you want to end the relationship? Like, what's going on? And I wasn't even aware that I was that emotionally shut down, that, she could feel that as a partner. She could feel that I couldn't connect her anymore, and that she ultimately wanted to end the relationship, which, I just wasn't emotionally aware of how much I'd kind of closed off. And I guess, we have all of these processes like, compassion and empathy and all of these things that exist that we're using to relate our way through life. And when we're seeing such grotesque stuff, or we're experiencing such high levels of stimulation, that we really have to kind of shut those down. and not really allowing us to do our job at the level that we want to do it at. So we're kind of naturally closing some of those things off. So, some of the most profound healing and growth I've had in the last couple of years is just really feeling again, like literally feeling, starting to feel compassion again, and to really open that up, and to cry, and to release all of the times where, you know, I should have been showing compassion, or I should have been showing love, which I wasn't able to, and to really kind of feel back into that. Yeah.
That's powerful, man. This is a selfish question, because this is something that, like we were speaking beforehand about me airing out a lot of my secrets, a lot of the cheating that I've done throughout my life, and having some of the girls come back to me with toxicity, like, which is deserved on my end. But in relinquishing a lot of those secrets, letting go of them, clearing the air as such, I've been able to step into giving 100% of myself to my partner and loving fully, and not self-sabotaging because of that. Was there any of that with you, not giving yourself fully to your partner because you didn't love yourself?
Massively, yeah. I think in my last relationship, when I got back from Jordan, in that breakdown of the relationship, we still try to keep things alive. And, you know, ultimately, I've always been looking for that external validation. I've always been looking for that love from my childhood, ever since that relationship with my parents. So if I'm not kind of getting that external validation, or that love, that's all I wanted, was kind of a love and acceptance that I couldn't give to myself, and then to receive that from other people. So I think definitely in those periods, I was out trying to be with other women, and to take on these darker coping mechanisms as just kind of a way to feel love, but also disconnect further. I think you know, war can mess you up pretty bad, and you know, just closing down those deeper parts of us that we need open for a reason. And I guess maybe feeling very shamed about that, and not understanding why I was acting the way that I was. I wanted to disconnect even further. Yeah, so definitely some dark periods there that, you know, I've done a lot of meditation on, and forgiven my heart a lot, and, you know, asked for forgiveness for the behaviours that I definitely was kind of showing, and yeah, some deep stuff there, man, real deep stuff. Like, yeah, and I think that's been, you know, a lot of my growth and a lot of my healing is to just kind of go into the heart and have forgiveness for myself and for those actions. Yeah.
Cool. That's one thing I don't want to skip over, but we can talk about forgiveness at the end, because I think if you are truly going to look at healing, if you do truly want to transform and become the best version of yourself, we've all fucked up, we've all made mistakes. There've been failures along all of our journeys or paths. So forgiveness is probably one of the most profound parts of that transition. But we'll come to that later. The last thing I want to touch on before we carry on with your story is knowing that you needed that external validation, and then knowing that your partner wasn't there with you. Did you have to become someone or something else within that Army Defence Force environment to get that external validation?
Yeah, I think I've always been a pretty cluey guy, like always been pretty smart, and I guess there's probably been like a bit of an element of, hey Dad, look what I've done, you know, and I've gone and made something that's really cool, and then gone up to Dad and say, hey, you know, give me the validation that I want. And I guess that I've always kind of, definitely not now, I think that that's a behaviour that I realised a long time ago that I've moved through. But definitely that was part of who I was becoming in certain moments, was to kind of get that validation that I was needing. And I did that in the Army. I was, you know, successful at my job and good at my career. And I think a lot of my driving force to be good at that job was to get the validation, and to know that I was excelling in my job was to receive something externally that I couldn't give to myself in that moment. Yeah.
That's awesome. Was there ever any resentment from your colleagues being that person? Because to me that sounds sort of like being the teacher's pet, and then therefore people dislike you because you are getting the recognition, the praise and the acknowledgement.
Yeah, I think at some points, yeah, definitely. Just the mindset I had around kind of achieving, and that I guess there's a lot of other people there that mightn't have been as achiever focused. So then you're kind of on different wavelengths. So I guess there can be kind of a bit of like resistance there between the two different people that are on two different paths. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's still that real brotherhood there that exists, that at the end of the day they know that I've got their back and I've got theirs. And you're doing so much like team bonding activities to break down those walls within the military that they kind of don't really exist. And when there's other people there that are kind of achiever focused and working hard for the team, allows you to bond with those people as well too and have some strong relationships.
That's awesome. And I think I asked that because within FIFO, say you're someone who likes to achieve, you strive to work hard, you're perceived as the brown noser, and then everyone is that crab in a bucket syndrome. They're trying to pull you back down to their level, because if you're working at that level, it means that they're not achieving what you're achieving, and therefore the expectation is that they step their game up to reach your level, because it's possible. And you've shown that. But I guess I can understand that within that army environment, the risks of not being together as this brotherhood are so much more severe than doing FIFO and just not achieving your job by a set time.
Look, brotherhood's brotherhood as well though too, and I've worked FIFO as well too. So I was working mining once I got out of the army in Perth, and not fly in, fly out, but I did a lot of project-based work as well there too. So I definitely seen that dynamic in mining as well too. So being that guy that comes from Perth who is achiever focused, and then so I felt both sides there, feeling that in the army and then in mining as well. But I definitely know what you're on about.
So you finally get deployed. Walk us through everything from there, and I'll just ask you a bunch of questions at the end.
So my deployment in Afghanistan was to Kandahar airfield. It's the biggest single runway in the world. Talking about, I think, 100,000 people that are living on this base, including third-party nationals. And that's kind of like a transit base for some of the forward operating bases. A lot of the people there are American, and you've got Australian contingents and other countries there that are kind of, and I guess me working in telecommunications, my deployment kind of was a lot different to some of the other Australian soldiers. So a lot of our other Australian forces are in Taran Count or forward operating bases. And then here I am stuck in a server room, like on a laptop, building and fixing and facilitating kind of drone feeds. So working with the Australian drones, and then making sure that the footage is kind of passed to where it needs to go to, so the headquarters element can kind of facilitate their missions, etc. I guess there's a lot of rocket attacks in that base, so we're talking like maybe 3-4 rocket attacks every second a day, which is quite a significant blast, like a Chinese rocket that the Taliban was shooting to the base. And I guess you really become desensitized to that. So I think the first few rocket attacks, you're like, what's going on here? A bit of stimulation. By the end of it's a joke. Like we're kind of jumping on our teammates, like playing stacks on as rockets are coming in, as kind of like, I guess, a bit of a dark humour coping mechanism. And I guess ultimately at the end of the day, all of these things kind of build up within the body. They're kind of like fight or flight responses that we're not really honouring. They're kind of levels of stimulation that we're not really honouring, and we're kind of just like filling them into a bucket, and we're just pushing them down further and further and further and further. And I guess a lot of it's got to do with how you're relating to your emotions, and what your exercise routine is, how busy you are, what are your other stresses as well when you're overseas. I come back from Afghanistan, I was in a pretty reasonable place, pretty hyper-vigilant, I guess, just slightly when I got back. My relationship with my partner, a little bit kind of edgy, but yeah, I was good to go. And I guess if I really looked at myself like with a bit of emotional intelligence and could kind of witness myself, I probably had bottled a lot of stuff up, and I kind of probably was stimulated and probably could have done some work on myself post that. But I guess when you don't have emotional intelligence, you're in the army and you're just worried about the next thing. I think once we got back from deployment, our unit had us on another course within 2 weeks. So we were away from our families again. And we're on a 20-day course, which was 10 to 11 hours a day, 2 weeks after just coming back from a 6-month trip. where you're working, 13-hour days, 14-hour days for 6 months straight, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Keep walking us through that.
So Brisbane life there. Did a few courses, etc., which is pretty standard for military. So when not deployed or not on certain tempo, you would come back and do some kind of promotional courses. Had a posting to go to Melbourne, and then got requested that I posted across to the SAS, so Special Air Service Regiment, as like a support staff. So then asked my partner at the time, she was up for that, and yeah, that's something that we both kind of signed up for. Come across here to Perth and started working with them. That was, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of smart guys there. So all the beret qualified people that are involved in that regiment, there's some really, really extremely smart, intelligent people that smooth operators that, they are a capability that needs to exist within the modern world, and they're there to kind of stick their hand up and call to do that role. Some pretty amazing capabilities within that unit to be on call at 4 hours notice to move and to be in another country within
Wow.
A few hours time. So it can be a simple phone call. There's a capability that's put on a plane and then ends up in another country, and they're there to support Australian citizens. So and then they've got obviously the capabilities that they take to Afghanistan and stuff like that as well too. So the capabilities that exist within there are kind of, necessary in the modern world to a certain extent.
And for someone who doesn't understand what you mean by capability?
I guess, international hostage situation, and therefore probably international counter-terrorism means. And I guess even long-range hostage situations out at sea, so international waters, etc., on boats. So a lot of different capabilities that exist there, like long-range reconnaissance and stuff. So I was just a support person there, which would be telecommunications, and then basically facilitating the unit to have communications when asked for. And at the time, pretty busy tempo again, so come into a really, really busy tempo, and to absorb that was more stimulation at the time. Less time to relate to my emotions, less time to witness my kind of stuff that I probably needed to see within myself, and then just more go.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the next deployment.
Yep. So that deployment was 6 months within Jordan, and that was kind of a coalition task force that was set up for monitoring ISIS at the time.
Yep.
And we're using basically the internet to monitor what ISIS was doing, and kind of using that as an intelligence kind of means. It's a pretty new capability for the army, and something that I probably wasn't really super aware of how much that was going to affect me emotionally as well too. So there's a lot of other people that have gone on that trip that I think have been fine and haven't been affected emotionally. And here's me as a young soldier looking at content that I thought wasn't affecting me, but slowly was kind of shaping my, my inner emotions, emotional numbing, they basically call it. That I wasn't aware that was happening on that deployment, and when I think back to my relationship with my partner at the time, the phone calls back home become less and less and less and less, to a point where I wasn't really relating to my partner back home because I wasn't relating to myself.
And so what content are we talking about?
Serious amounts of beheadings. Probably the most stimulating or reactive thing that I saw there was a Jordanian pilot had crashed his plane in Syria while we were there. He was captured, and then he was burned alive on HD video. So a similar production to what we have here now. They basically put that around a cage and then set him on fire. So at the time watching that in Jordan, I was, this is fine, this isn't affecting me at all. But I just kind of didn't really have that emotional intelligence to realise what it was doing. And then to see, when we were there, the king kind of retaliated by sending his bombers over, and we kind of seen those planes fly overhead one day, and that he was just going to attack civilian targets there as retaliation, etc. And I guess kind of, these things you're taking on in the moment. And, I think every soldier's got a story. Like, some of the stuff that I've heard from some of the other people that are surviving PTSD kind of, makes my story look pretty low level. And some of the experiences that some of the, the normal soldiers that I've had that have experienced IED blasts and actual missions out in the field, like some of the stuff that they've been through, it's pretty full on, yeah.
So how often would you have to do something like that, watch that sort of content?
So we're basically in a area where that was on screens pretty much all day long. Yeah, so it was probably exposure to that maybe most days for 6 months. Yeah.
Wow. No wonder you were shutting off.
Yeah.
With every day.
Yeah.
Towards your partner.
Yeah.
That's that makes me shudder even just thinking about watching something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't even like watching MTV when they had those the programs where someone would break a bone, let alone to have to watch something like that.
Yeah.
So, do you have an understanding of, I guess, how that influenced your behaviour moving forward from that deployment?
Yeah, I think that I can tell that from how I've tuned into my body now, and it's kind of like that compassion and empathy that should exist within a healthy male is kind of limited, and I can really see that was playing out once I got back. That compassion and empathy was kind of really struggling to be present within my emotional body, and I guess that reactive fight or flight response kind of had me at a certain level of, I guess there's a real physical component to it as well too, because as we're seeing this level of stimulation within our military career, our adrenaline and our cortisol are kind of playing off within our body as well too. So we kind of get addicted to the adrenaline and cortisol that's within our body from the stimulation that exists within our time in the army. So yeah, I guess once I got out of the military and into mining, I could really witness, it took me a while, but I could really witness how addicted I was to stress. And it was kind of stress was my way to recreate some chaos that, I was missing from the army. And I was basically trying to find stress in my work and my relationships, etc. I was trying to find just, content on the news to be angry about for no reason, because I was getting an emotional supply out of that. So adrenaline and cortisol would kind of be triggering me. And then I'd be feeling fulfilled, or I kind of be feeling at that baseline that I kind of needed, or the normal, I guess, I kind of created in the army.
And that's probably one thing that you changed my whole perspective on, because until I met you, until you walked me through how you viewed PTSD, I had no real clear understanding of it. And so having this understanding that it's an addiction to whatever you've been through previously, that sort of expanded my awareness around that and allowed me to have a lot more empathy and compassion for people going through PTSD. So I feel like you, with what you've been through and the message you have and the way that you can articulate it, it's super powerful, and it's going to be profound for not only veterans, but anyone going through PTSD moving forward. So I'm grateful that you're doing that.
Yeah.
But within that, knowing that you're in that environment, knowing that you've become this person who's shut themselves off emotionally, they've disassociated, they're a part of that brotherhood, and you're now craving all of this emotion. How did you go about transitioning from the army into civilian life and relinquishing that identity? Because I can understand, and I speak about FIFO because that's all I can relate to.
Yeah.
Relinquishing FIFO is damn hard, even just the money aspect of it. But I can't imagine how hard it is for someone being in that environment, being in that sort of brotherhood, transitions back to civilian life.
Yeah, I guess ultimately when you're addicted to adrenaline and cortisol, your identity is kind of based off that, and I guess you're kind of transition into that corporate busy environment, and you're flogging yourself again, you're working really long hours to kind of fulfill that adrenaline and cortisol that's kind of existing, creating that stress. So I don't think that identity crisis was a big thing for me, as long as I kind of jumped into stress, because I guess, I just went from one stress to the other stress, and it kind of was fulfilling me, or meeting the needs that I'd kind of created within the army. And then I guess I basically got to a point where, I was tired. Like 12, 13 years of living a stressful life basically took its toll. And I'd injured myself. So I did the meniscus in my right knee and a slap tear in my right shoulder. I couldn't train anymore. And I guess that I couldn't supplement some of the stuff that I had. I guess I couldn't cope, or I didn't have a coping mechanism. And I guess over these times, I dabbled with meditation, like the Headspace app, etc.
Yeah.
And I guess in kind of then going further into meditation and kind of starting to witness parts of myself, a real game changer for me was Roy Hill. So the place that I used to work was Roy Hill, Gina Reinhardt's mining company. And they put on basically a leadership course where they were teaching emotional intelligence. And they were basically teaching us about the amygdala and the fight or flight response, and I was like, what is this information? Like, computers, like, then I basically had all this new data for me to process, and then I realised what emotional intelligence was, and I think I kind of witnessed some of my behaviours for the first time. And I'd been so reactive and living this like stimulated fight or flight reactive life for so long that I hadn't really kind of witnessed myself. And in that, learning what emotional intelligence was, that's when I actually said, okay, that's my identity, that's who I am, that's what my behaviours are, etc. Let's change that. I don't like that. That's not what I'm about, and let's kind of grow. And I guess ever since that course, I've just, been choosing healthier choices. I don't get it wrong all the time. I definitely still make mistakes, etc. Definitely still get triggered, and definitely still healing stuff from the past. But I'm basically showing up in every moment to just make like a slightly healthier choice, whether that be food, and I don't drink anymore. I eat a pretty plant-based diet, no dairy, etc. So like 99% of the time vegan, and that makes me feel good. That's why I do it. Meditation a lot, a lot of breath work and a lot of self-development work, and I guess my identity now is me just being a healthier version of myself and kind of stepping into who I want to be in the present moment versus relating to all these past versions of myself that I'm kind of freeing myself from, and in the process I get to experience a healthier life and healthier relationships and more joy and more feelings, more emotions,
which is a good thing.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I took myself off to Bali, like at the end in December.
Yep.
And just kind of really went deep into myself, so lots of meditation, lots of breath work, lots of healing, and wrote a book while I was over there for soldiers to kind of be able to witness themselves as well, maybe understand themselves better as males, which, that was a really cool thing to do. I've only read like 10 books in my life. I'm a simple kid from the country and not the best speller, so to really lean in and to understand that I could, write something and contribute something to that brotherhood, and to kind of be of service, and to, take some of the stuff that I've learned in Bali and then pass it on to other people. It was really cool, but it was really cool to lean in and see what I was capable of, changing my story.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
First of all, as someone who has lived a reactive life throughout their service within the army and military, how do you initially give yourself permission or allow yourself to step out of masculine, like being entrenched and seeking that adrenaline rush, into something like meditation? Because even for most civilians that haven't been through anything as traumatic as that, taking that step into meditation, which is viewed as woo-woo or esoteric, that's just not a step that they allow themselves to take.
Man, like meditation is far from woo-woo. We've got so many different cognitive functions that are happening within our mind. Like the mind is no different to the bicep and the shoulder. It just moves in certain ways and it does certain things. And once we understand that there's certain kind of cognitive functions that are driving our behaviours, whether it be a fight or flight response, or whether our mind is kind of drifting off into the future, or basically, depending on what our mind is doing, we can kind of basically set a meditation practice to tap into that and to really take control of it and to really strengthen it. So then that just becomes like our default behaviour of how we're showing up to the moment and how we can kind of remain present. And I guess just start somewhere and just chip away at it. And there is no right or wrong. There is no this has to be done in a certain way. And I guess it's probably why I teach meditation these days, is because I taught myself it. And I was creating my own meditations in my own mind for my own needs, of my own personal needs, and just tailoring my meditations to kind of assist me. And then it's probably one of the reasons that I love to teach it now, is because there's a different meditation out there for everyone, different points in their life that we can actually go on and learn. Yeah.
Cool. Before we jump into the different sort of meditations, were you at a point where you had to delve into meditation and breathwork and stuff like that for self-development to break out of this cycle?
Definitely there was cycles to be broken, and meditation was really helping that. I was probably meditating for like 30, 40 minutes a day, and then something really profound happened. I guess I'd been stimulated for so long that bang, all of a sudden my energy stores just like shut down. I must have had like chronic fatigue or adrenaline fatigue or something, and I could hardly even get out of bed. And I guess that didn't happen until I really created the space in my life to heal. Like I was meditating 40 minutes a day, I was eating amazing food, I was really healing myself, and then my body said, okay, cool. We can really shut off this stimulation thing and we can really relax, and kind of, it's just myself balancing itself out, and in that relaxation and in that space, could go even deeper into my meditation and kind of go and break some of those deeper cycles. And I guess one of the big ones for me was anger. I guess I was really kind of angry at myself, deep within, and I guess I didn't really know why. And that was probably one of the biggest things I needed to shift in Bali, is when I got there was just this deep river of anger that existed in me. I could wake up like some days in bed and just feel it instantly in my body, that there was anger there, and that it really needed to be moved and accepted and witnessed and felt, probably more importantly.
Yeah.
I think...
where did that come from?
I think that when we put ourselves into, say, the military, deep down there's a deep level of resentment within our bodies that we're kind of pushing them to these deep levels. And every time our mind tells our body to push itself further than it really wants to, there's a certain level of resentment that we hold against ourselves, and that can kind of relate in anger. And I guess even there's probably certain levels of anger that on a deep psyche level that we don't actually understand about us actually being at war and facilitating war, and these things that we're kind of subconsciously creating anger about, that we're kind of so far out of alignment. Alignment for me these days is meditating and living a really peaceful lifestyle, and I know that when I'm in that alignment that I'm not angry. And I think how far I pushed myself out of that to be in the military, and what that alignment looked like, pretty similar to FIFO, like working those 14-hour days for 10 days in a row, you're out of alignment, and then our anger is just a natural response within us of us being out of alignment from where we should kind of be.
Yeah.
We're breaking our own boundaries. And I guess I had 10 years or probably 12 or 13 years worth of boundaries that I'd broken within myself, that I needed to be angry about, and I needed to kind of release and witness. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So in terms of different types of meditation, can you break them down for us?
I think a big one for soldiers and for people that are living busy lifestyles these days is kind of using the breath and kind of tapping into this space that we need to create. So kind of like tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system. So there's different nervous systems that we hold and within our body, and when we can kind of tap into certain nervous systems, it's allowing us to kind of unwind all of the stress and the fight or flight response. So I guess a simple amount of breath work in the morning as soon as we wake up, and then even a 5 to 10 minute meditation where we're altering our breath through our nose. We can kind of really tap into these different nervous systems, and we can start to unwind some of the stimulation that we've taken on that day or in previous days as well. So that's a big one. And the modern world is so stimulating, whether we're drinking coffee, going to the gym, hopping in the car, talking with our missus. A lot of it can be severely stimulating, and we're taking that on in our nervous system, and then over time that's kind of that's showing. I guess there's mantra-based meditation. So there's a lot of people that are worrying these days. Fear is a big thing in society. In that stimulation normally comes from a place of fear, from a place of worry that we're worried we're going to be late. We're worried that we're not going to have enough money. We're worried we're not going to be accepted. We're worried that we're not going to be loved. And there's not probably a person on this planet that doesn't have some kind of unconscious worry or fear within them. So mantra-based meditation can be really profound at being aware that we're getting carried away in a story and that we're worrying, and we can kind of bring ourselves back to the present moment, and we can kind of create a cognitive function where we can step out of that worry. And we can step out of that worry because we can kind of step out of the story and step out of that everything's going to be okay. We just got to get out of our own heads, etc. So there's I think there's hundreds of meditations like inner child. So inner child meditations have been pretty profound for me to kind of go back and witness some of the stories between my mum and my father, and etc., and make peace with that internally. Just breath work in itself, that's pretty powerful. That's obviously a different modality of meditation, but I think that some of the meditations that you have after breath work, when we're truly getting out of our mind, we're altering kind of the brain waves within our head. So we're kind of normally walking around in beta brain waves.
Yep.
And then we kind of can go to theta and gamma. And gamma brain waves are pretty much where a Buddhist monk is meditating at. So if we're doing enough breath work and then we jump into meditation afterwards, we can start meditating like a Buddhist monk. So I definitely haven't lived in a monastery for 30 years, but it's pretty cool to get down into those really true meditative states where our body can really just relax and unwind, and our mind can really have the space that it needs to witness what it kind of needs in the moment. And in us witnessing ourselves deeper, we can kind of let go of what we need to in the past, or we can kind of get that clarity that we really are looking for. Yeah,
that's awesome, man. I think we've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
So before I ask you some wrap-up questions, one of the things you touched on a few times throughout your story was bringing it back to forgiveness and forgiving yourself for any of the mistakes that you made, or the person that you were, the behavior that you exhibited. Mm-hmm. How does someone, knowing everything that you've been through, knowing everything that you've worked through and processed, how would someone who is holding on to guilt or shame go about forgiving themselves?
I'd say grab a pen and paper to start off with and just start writing. A lot of the shame can exist kind of within two parts. It exists within our emotional body and our physical body, but the mind as well too. And when we write, we're kind of tapping into that left and right hemisphere within our mind, and we can just start to basically just write. You can even swap hands and write with the opposite hand as well too. But just start somewhere, go to a place where you feel resistance. Often on this path where I feel resistance, or somewhere my mind is telling me not to go, is often where the biggest healing is. So, even if you recollect over your life and think, oh, I don't need to heal that, that's fine, that's where you need to go. And that's the mind's way of kind of protecting us from actually kind of revisiting the past. So, go to the places where your childhood and the stuff where you think you don't need to heal, because that's where you probably need to heal the most, and just start to write that stuff out, and start to allow yourself to witness what comes up, and just having a normal meditation practice. And by even you just setting the intention to want to go back and revisit parts of your past that you want to have forgiveness, that's all it really takes, is to set that intention of, I'm ready to forgive myself for some of the past. And once we set that intention and we do some journaling, you'd be well on your way. The rest would kind of take care of itself. But that intention and effort is kind of the main thing. I think that, one of the most profound realizations I've had in this path is just, it's all intention and effort. And if our intention is to go back and forgive ourselves, and the effort is journaling, or the effort is meditation, you'll receive it. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. And have you ever felt throughout that process that you needed anyone else's forgiveness or acceptance to forgive yourself?
Yeah, I think as we forgive our external world, it allows us to kind of forgive ourselves on our internal world. And I think that the relationship definitely, like stuff with my mum and my dad, there was like levels of forgiveness with them. And then I guess as of late, been levels of forgiveness within myself. I guess probably not acknowledging some of the pain that I've been through in my life, and some of the, what it felt like to be overweight as a kid in school, and what it felt like to not have that love from my parents, and then not acknowledging that, I guess kind of locking that away and not really allowing myself to feel that. I have to forgive myself for that as well too. So yeah, it's a cool path. It's ever unwinding and always continuing. And you can even tell now in this interview that I'm pretty kind of like, there's not a lot of expression here.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've got work to do, and I'm super pumped about that. And I think that this interview can be really powerful for other soldiers to kind of witness within themselves that they might be closed off emotionally, and that they might need to be able to express themselves more freely and kind of express their emotions more powerfully. And yeah, it's something that I'm really excited to just keep on working on and keep on diving through. And yeah, it's a lot of conditioning and a lot of stuff to keep working on.
And one of the most powerful things that I think people can take away from you talking about not having any real emotion attached to what you're talking about, that's because you're so content within yourself now. You're so content within your growth that you've done and the growth to come. So it's knowing that everything's going to work out, and therefore you're not having to try and bury or suppress any of that emotion. That's the distinction that I want people to understand, is that you're content with who you are and you're working through it. Therefore you don't feel like you need to express it, because you've been through all that, you've worked through that, all that, instead of being someone who is just suppressing it.
Yeah. I think I've definitely, you can see the, I'm probably even like a little bit, I'd say there's probably parts of me here that are slightly shy, I guess, like being in front of the camera, and probably there's patterns of my childhood that are coming up to be witnessed here as well too, that I'm probably a little bit shy and I'm not expressing myself, I'm not free, and I'm like smiling from ear to ear. And I had a really profound moment a little while ago. I went on like a Qigong course, so it was a retreat with other veterans. We went to Queensland, and when I was doing a particular pose, I smiled like fully, like this. And I don't think I've ever smiled fully my whole entire life. I've been so self-conscious about my teeth that I've always kind of suppressed my smile. And on that course, to witness myself fully smiling as a male, and to actually like give myself a big grin, there's so many parts of me that I'm holding back, and it's not on purpose, or it's just because I haven't consciously become aware of those yet. And that's kind of my new mission in life, is just to feel and go deeper and to love myself deeper, so I can show up and be that full expressing human that I know I am. And I'm not beating myself up about this. I just kind of know that it's my path and why I'm here. And I hope this interview can kind of help other soldiers maybe witness a few behaviours in themselves, and maybe understand that that closed off life is, and that anger life and that kind of disgruntledness that we hold on to after the army is a choice, you know. Like, there's a lot of people that are still out of the army that are angry and kind of projecting their anger to different organisations and to different things within their life, but that anger is like really a choice. Like we really have a choice to kind of do the work to free ourselves from that and to be better versions of ourselves.
Yeah, just to expound upon that a little bit. We've got a couple minutes, so I'll make this quick. But in terms of you talking about meditation and the power it has, the cognitive functions, the easiest way I think to look at meditation and its impact on the way that we live our lives is that we have like 50 to 60,000 plus thoughts every day, with like 5,000 of those possibly being conscious, depending on your level of consciousness. And with every thought, we can choose to filter from one to the other, from negative to positive, from destructive to constructive. And every thought therefore creates, it's manifested as feelings, words, or actions. And then from there, that behavior dictates or governs the way that you live your life, the way that you interact with others, the way that you interact with yourself. And in saying that, if your life is a certain way and you're not happy with it, meditation literally gives you the tools to not control, but I guess govern the behavior that you exhibit, the way that you interact with the world around you and the life that you live.
Yeah, definitely. Even a factor of control, like as we remove the stories of the past and we inject stories, the new ones that we want, we're controlling the output. So our life, our thoughts, our actions can be controlled by what we put into our mind. And so in meditation, if we're fulfilling positive thoughts and positive new images and positive stories, and that's what we're really focusing on in our meditation, we are controlling the person that we put out the other side, and we can show up in the world however we want when we take full control. But I guess a lot of it is kind of removing those stories from the past that kind of keep showing up, which are hijacking our thoughts, feelings and actions and our words. And in removing those and in witnessing those and kind of becoming consciously aware of them, well then we can actually start to put our own stuff in there as well too.
That's awesome, man.
A
couple quick questions and we'll wrap up. Knowing everything that you've been through, which is a hell of a lot, been through a lot of stress, buried a lot, and processed a lot. What would you say the quality of your life is like now?
Magic. My life at the moment's blowing me away. Just kind of what I'm receiving and the synchronicity and everything that I get to see in my day-to-day life is just huge. The relationship I have with my current partner, Ruth, is, amazing. And, you know, it's really cool to be able to, she's my biggest mechanism for growth and leaning into that and to experience like deeper levels of love and intimacy. And I just, you know, how could it get any better, basically?
It's beautiful, man. What are you most grateful for?
Everything. My list of gratitude goes forever. I was really grateful to see my brother this morning, Luca Reedy, put on his cold water 100. So I went for a swim this morning at Scarborough, and that was really cool to witness the effort that he put in, how he showed up week in, week out, and then what that turned into, and how he was able to create like a little bit of impact for 100 people today to get into the beach at Scarborough and to kind of take control of their mind, to lean into a little bit of resistance. And so I was really grateful for him for the Cold Water Club, but grateful for him as a brother.
That's amazing. Proud of you, Luca. Last question.
I heard he's dirty on you for not showing up
he is.
By the way.
Guilt trips galore. Jeez. Last question. If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard somewhere where you know thousands of people would see it every day, what would that message be?
Feel to heal, probably.
Nice. Succinct, concise, powerful. It's awesome, right?
You know, I think ultimately there's a lot of times where we're too up in our heads, and ultimately it's just to come back to that place of body and to get into our body and out of our mind and to really feel that. That's how we can kind of get our way through life truly, like when we're kind of feeling in our body and out of our heads. Meditation is a means to an end. The meditation and all of that is kind of for us to drop into here, and when we're kind of living this heart-centered kind of feeling lifestyle, that's when we're at our best, yeah.
It's awesome, man. To wrap up, I want to acknowledge you first of all for turning up, for being patient while we set up this first interview. But most of all, brother, for knowing everything that you've been through, the stuff throughout childhood, not feeling loved, worrying about your teeth, being overweight, and then everything you've been through throughout your service, and working through all of that, and now having written your own book, now being a teacher of meditation, doing what you're doing, just flowing and letting everything come to you, bro. I'm so grateful that you are in the position you're in now, that you're doing it right here in our town, Perth, and I'm just grateful to have you in my life.
Thanks, bro. Feeling's mutual, and yeah, I look forward to kind of just watching and backing, supporting us on our journeys. It's really amazing to see the work that you're doing and giving us males the opportunity to open up. It's powerful, it's pretty healing in itself, and yeah, I'm honoured to be here, bro.
Thank you, bro.
Cheers.
All right.